Thanks for coming back.
Well, I'm coldly pragmatic, so it's going to be a big difference. It's such a delight to be here, and it's actually really nice for me to speak to a Zoomer audience. Normally, when I'm standing in front of a group of people speaking, it's to university-age students. And just to give you an idea of how young they are, most of them weren't even alive the last time the Blue Jays won the World Series. That's how long it's been that's how young they are. I teach a course on the economics of sex and love. And I require my students to write a research paper, and one of them came to me recently and said that he wanted to write a paper about the relationship between the age at which a woman gets married and the probability that she gets divorced. And so I thought this is a good topic because it's a good economic story that talks about how it is that women who marry in their late teens and their early 20s often find themselves single 10 years later. But when I pressed him for what his actual hypothesis was, he said, well, I think that the older a woman is when she gets married, the more likely she is to divorce. This is the exact opposite of what I expected him to say. So I said, well, tell me why you think that would be true. And he says this. He says, well, everybody knows if a woman isn't married by the time she's 30, she becomes so desperate, she'll marry just anyone. So I love my students, but I actually think they watch far too much TV. So I said, go ahead and do the project, because he's going to find out when he looks at the data that this is not true, and then he can explain that himself. But, to be fair to him, society has some interesting views of what it means to be a single woman. And particularly for women above a certain age, I think we're perpetually fed this line that we're searching for love on a market that doesn't value us, that we're searching for a market in which we are gravely disadvantaged. And so we are constantly being told, you are a seller on a buyer's market, lower your price. Let me tell you a story that I think illustrates this. I was talking to a prospective suitor just recently, and he said to me, before you say no, which, by the way, I had already said no, before you say no, I want you to hear me out. I've done the math. And for every available man your age, there are 40 women. 40. Now, if you don't mind me saying, you're not that attractive. And so if you ever hope to find a man, you're going to have to learn to compromise. I think you should give me a chance. And he's still single. It's hard to believe, isn't it? You are a seller in a buyer's market. Lower your price. Economics, when we think about economics, we think about buyers and sellers coming together and exchanging goods and services for money. Supply and demand. Those are the most common economic terms that we understand. So it's understandable that when we think about economics markets for sex and love, we try to apply the same understanding. And when we do that, we have a tendency to think along these terms. We say on the market for sex and love, women are the sellers and men are the buyers because, for some reason I've never fully understood, men value sex more than women, and so women have to be compensated in order to have sex with men. That's the general understanding that people apply. And the problem with this really naive view of the market is that it just illustrates, the problem with this idea of the market is that if there are people single, and there's always people single, then it has to be true that the sellers are just setting their prices too high. So that women, given their value in the market, should be lowering their prices. And so if people are single, it has to be true that women aren't doing that, right? But this is not my view of the economy, the market for sex and love. To me, the market for sex and love is like a barter economy that does not have currency to facilitate trade. When we have money, I can trade with anyone who is selling what I want to buy just by giving them cash. But on the market for sex and love, I can only trade with somebody who is both buying what I have to sell and is selling what I want to buy. On the market for sex and love, we are all buyers and we are all sellers. And what that means is that the market is unbelievably inefficient because we have to satisfy that need to find somebody who wants what we're selling and is selling what we want. And so there are always going to be people who are single on the market. So there's not currency on the market for sex and love, but there is something else. And that is when you are having a hard time clearing your market, when you're having a hard time finding somebody who wants to buy what you're selling and is selling what you want to buy, then you always have the option of lowering your expectations. Now, you are all old enough to have remembered a Mad TV skit that was in the 1990s called Lowered Expectations. Do you remember that? It was a great skit. It's one of my favorites. And it was a skit that was basically mock advertisements for a video dating library. And the skit started in 1995, and it started with this spiel by one of their characters, who is Ms. Not Nice. And it went like this. I'm going to do this spiel for you, okay? Just because I love it. It goes like this. Are you having trouble finding your ideal mate? How about any mate? Do you fear that you'll be the last man or woman on earth, still not getting any? And yet you hope to find the prince or princess of your dreams? Well, wake up, sleeping ugly, because your only hope is lowered expectations. Our video library will introduce you to thousands of chronically rejected singles, just as hard up and pathetic as you. So good luck. You're going to need it. So I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but Lowered Expectations appeared on TV screens around the same time as a very real dating service appeared on computer screens, Match.com. And this brings me to my next point, is that the market for older singles is difficult. It's difficult because there's very few players. And when you have very few players, it's difficult to clear a market because it's so much harder to find somebody who is selling what you want to buy and then buying what you want to sell. But that's actually less true now than it ever has been before, right? It's true that for us as individuals, that when we get older, it's harder because the market becomes smaller. We're not in college anymore, right, where there's lots of single people who are looking to hook up. But actually, in reality, it's a much better market because there are many, many more people on the market than there was in the past, right? I was actually going to say, it's not your mother's market, but since my mother's on the market at the same time as I am, is actually exactly my mother's market, except that she seems to be doing much better than I am on it. The market for sex and love has really changed. One of the reasons is, based on the discussion we had this morning, people are living a lot longer, right? You know, new relationships, they take time, they take effort, they take energy. I like to think about a new relationship as like an asset. You make an original investment, and then it pays out over several years. It's like an annuity, right? And it's only worth making that original investment if you know you're going to get the return into the future. When we didn't live very long, making those investments in later in life, they just weren't worthwhile. But now that we're living longer, people are still searching for love and romance and for sexual relationships long after previous generations would have thought themselves way past new romance. So that's one of the reasons. The second reason is because of the new technologies. So I already mentioned Match.com, but access to the internet has completely changed the market, right? It's difficult to search for markets for sex and love. It's difficult to come across people who are buying what you want to sell and selling what you want to buy. But when you have a much larger market created by the internet, then it's much easier to do that. And it's not just online dating services too, it includes social networking sites. There's a study done by the Oxford Internet Institute that looked at how people met, and they found that among people who met online since 1997, the older generation was far more likely to have met via the internet. So if you look at people who were met in their 20s, only about 19% of people met online. But if you look at people who were in their 50s and their 60s, about 38% of people met online. So the internet has made huge progress in making that market much bigger than it ever was previously. So I want to return to this idea about the fact that women are disadvantaged on this market. one of the reasons why we have this perception that women are so disadvantaged is because we genuinely believe that on this market, women are searching for long-term committed relationships and that men are searching for short-term sexual relationships. Essentially, we believe that older singles search for exactly the same thing as younger singles. And I don't really think that's true. You know, younger women search for committed relationships because they hope to form a commitment with somebody who will help raise the children that she's potentially going to bear in the relationship. You know, once our fertility is such that that's no longer an issue, older women are freed up to have any type of relationship they want, right? It creates an incentive, or at least removes some of the risk of going out and having short-term sexual relationships. At the same time, older men have a new economic incentive, and that's because men live shorter lives than women, that gap is getting a lot smaller. The lion's share of caregiving often goes to women. And so there's an incentive later in life to find somebody to commit to you so that she could provide caregiving to you later on. I was in a water taxi just last week, and I was talking to the driver of the boat, and he was telling me about his search for wife number 5. And he's probably in his early 60s. And he says to me, he says, "What I'm looking for is a nurse with a purse." I've been doing this for many, many years. This is the first time I've heard. Is this a common expression that I've just never heard? A nurse with a purse? It's hard to imagine that he hasn't found someone, right? So the thing is, for women who, you know, they have there's less risks associated with having short-term casual sexual relationships. And so unless there's going to be a big return to a long-term commitment, women who are afraid of having to take excessive responsibility for caregiving, they're more likely to be looking for short-term relationships. So I think it's really false to believe that women at this stage of our lives are looking for commitment. And I also think it's false to believe that men at this stage of their lives are just looking for short-term sexual relationships. I think it's a very different market. And because of that, it kind of changes the dynamics in the market. It removes a lot of the market power that goes to men at an early age, right? Men who are younger have a lot of market power because they're not looking for the long-term commitment. So this is actually a testable hypothesis, right? Are women disadvantaged on the market? And some researchers have done this. They looked at online dating sites, and they looked at the way that people message with each other, right? And if it was really true that older women were disadvantaged on the market, then you would see older women really lowering their standards of what they're looking for, right? Lowering their expectations, lowering the price. And what they find is the exact opposite. They find that older women are very selective about who they're willing to talk to online. They're not only more selective than men, they're actually more selective than younger women are too, over a whole bunch of different qualities, including, you know, height and education, somebody's religion. They really care about these things. So given that we don't see women repeatedly compromising on what they want, I don't think there's any reason to believe that we're disadvantaged on the market. So why do we care about this? Why does this matter? It matters because markets only function properly when everybody has full information. Without full information, the market for sex and love doesn't really perform. If you have men who are overstating their power on the market, if they think women are really disadvantaged in the market and so should be willing to compromise on what they'll expect, there's going to be a lot of men who are going to be very disappointed. And if you have women who are understating their power in the market, then you're going to have a lot of women who will rather exit the market rather than stay believing that they have to make a big sacrifice. I hear this from women all the time. Women who could be searching for relationships, women who would love to be in relationships, but aren't putting the time and energy in because they genuinely believe that there's no hope for them on the market. I repeatedly hear women say, men my age are only looking for younger women. And so they don't bother searching for themselves. The truth is, men their age are looking for younger women. But the news is they're not getting them, right? So they're going to have to learn and when you look at the data, right, it's fine. You know, I actually went out with a man a couple of years ago who was probably 10 years older than me, and he said to me during my date, he says, I should tell you now, I only date women who are younger than my daughter. I know. I have terrible taste in men, if you might have noticed this. Okay, so this is why this matters, is because if without full information, the market doesn't perform properly. Women drop out of the market because they think they have no value, and men keep searching because they think that they're entitled to matches that they're just never going to find. So I have a story that illustrates this. I know somebody who's searching on the market, she's searching online. She's on every dimension, a catch. She's got a good income, she's got multiple recreational homes, she's healthy, she's really attractive, and she likes to have a good time. And she received a message from a man showing interest, and she responded with a really simple note. She said, hello, nice to meet you, and then waited for the response. And instead of getting a pleasant response back, what she got from him was a diatribe rebuking her for her lack of effort. The person actually said to her, you should consider yourself lucky that I even contacted you. And you should, you need to, I'm gonna ignore you now, but you need to learn to put more effort in the future. And so here we have two people who stay single. One stays single because he overstates his value on the market, and the other stays single because she doesn't want to lower her expectations in order to be in a relationship, and nor does she have to, right? So Moses loves data. And so I'm going to end with some data that I think that you will appreciate, and then I think Moses will appreciate, that just shows how different the market for sex and love is for people who are a little bit older. Researchers have looked at how pleasurable sex is for people who are over 50, depending on the type of relationship they're in, whether they're in a committed relationship or whether they're having a casual sexual experience. And what they find is that men over 50 who have sex within a committed relationship find it far more pleasurable than men who are having casual sex. So 91% of men had an orgasm the last time they had sex. Yeah, I'm the only economist who gets to cite orgasm data, just for the record. 91% of men whose last sexual experience was somebody they're in a committed relationship with had an orgasm, compared to 80% of men who had sex with somebody who was just a casual acquaintance. And when you look at women, it's the exact opposite. Women who had casual sexual relationships found them far more pleasurable than those who are in committed relationships. Oh no, you haven't heard the statistics yet. Okay? 58% of women had an orgasm when they were having sex with somebody who they're in a committed relationship with, compared to, ready? 80% who were having sex with somebody who was a casual sexual partner, a friend or something like that, right? So this may not sound like an economic story, it may not sound like economic evidence to you, but if anything, women shouldn't be lowering their price in order to enter long-term committed relationships. If anything, they should set their prices really high, right? Because it seems like they're giving something up there. And that is it.
That was inspiring, and it means there's hope for us yet.
Well, actually, when you said the gentleman this morning, he said he's only had 4 wives, and you said he had 6, and you said 4. I thought, there's still lots of time for 2 more.
That's right. Yeah, he was full of beans, wasn't he? That's great. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Marina.